The moment our lips met, time seemed to freeze. It wasn't just a kiss, it was as if the world itself had paused, holding its breath. I had never believed in love at first sight, but in that instant, something inside me shifted. His touch, soft yet full of intensity, sent a spark through my veins that I couldn't explain. For a fleeting moment, I thought I could feel his heartbeat in sync with mine, as if we were both a part of something much bigger than ourselves. I didn't know him, not really, but there was an undeniable connection that pulled us together. His name was Luke, a stranger whose face I had passed by countless times, but never truly noticed until that one night at the local cafe. The crowd had been buzzing, but when our eyes locked, everything else faded away. His gaze held me captive, and I felt an invisible thread tethering us, binding us in a way that left me breathless. Luke had never been the type to make an impression on others, but that night, under the soft glow of the cafe lights, he had a magnetic energy that I couldn't resist. He was different, mysterious, and yet so familiar, like someone I had known in another life. I couldn't put my finger on it, but when he leaned in, his lips brushing mine, it felt like I had waited my whole life for that moment. The kiss lingered, leaving me with a mix of excitement and confusion. What was this? Was this love? Or was it something deeper, something more powerful? The questions raced through my mind as I pulled back, staring into his eyes for answers. But all he did was smile, a knowing look in his gaze, and he whispered something I would never forget. "Now, you're mine." Those words echoed in my mind long after he had walked away. What did he mean by that? And why did I feel as though my heart had just been claimed without my consent? The kiss had stolen my heart, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to give it. The words Luke had whispered lingered in my mind like a haunting melody. "Now you're mine." What did that even mean? I had barely known him, yet that kiss had felt so real, so intense. It was as if he had unlocked something inside me that I didn't know existed. But there was a part of me that resisted the pull. What kind of person says something like that after a single kiss? The days that followed were a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about him. Every corner I turned, I half expected to see his familiar yet enigmatic face, but he was nowhere to be found. The cafe where we had met seemed to hold its breath whenever I walked by, as if it too was waiting for him to appear. I even asked the barista, hoping for some sort of clue, but he just gave me a puzzled look, like I had imagined it all. I found myself searching for answers in the silence of my own thoughts. Who was Luke? Why did I feel like we shared some kind of bond, a connection I couldn't explain? I had never believed in soulmates, but with each passing day, I began to wonder if I had been wrong all along. Then, almost as if the universe was mocking me, Luke finally appeared, on the busiest street in town, standing in the crowd like he belonged there. He smiled when our eyes met, a slow, knowing smile that sent a chill down my spine. But this time, there was something different in his gaze, something darker, more intense. He took a step toward me, and my heart raced. Was I ready for whatever came next? Or was this a love that would consume me in ways I couldn't possibly understand? Luke took another step forward, and the air between us felt charged with something unspoken. I couldn't explain it, but in that moment, it was as if the world had narrowed down to just the two of us. He didn't need to say anything for me to feel the weight of his presence. It was as if I had been waiting for him, unknowingly, my whole life. "I thought I lost you," he said softly, his voice rich with an emotion I couldn't place. There was a vulnerability in his words that caught me off guard. I wasn't prepared for this side of him. The confident, mysterious stranger who had claimed my heart with a single kiss was now revealing a different layer, a side that seemed almost broken. "Why are you saying that?" I asked, my voice shaky despite my efforts to keep calm. You, you don't even know me. His gaze softened for a moment, and he stepped closer, his proximity making my heart race even faster. I do know you, in ways that you can't possibly understand right now. 1,000 questions swirled in my mind, but I couldn't find the words to voice them. I had no idea what he was talking about. He couldn't know me, not really. But there was something in his eyes, a depth of feeling that left me unsure of everything I thought I knew. I don't understand, I whispered, my breath catching in my throat. Who are you? What do you want from me? Luke hesitated for just a moment before answering. I'm here because I have to protect you. There's more to this than just the kiss, and there's more to you than you realize. His words sent a shiver down my spine, and I felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of fear. Protection? What could he possibly mean by that? Was I in danger? And if so, from whom? Just then, a voice interrupted our exchange, sharp, demanding. Luke, what are you doing here? We both turned, and my heart skipped a beat. A figure emerged from the shadows, their presence both threatening and familiar. The figure's eyes locked onto Luke, and for the first time, I saw fear flash across his face. I didn't know who this new person was, but the tension in the air was undeniable. Luke's protective gaze shifted to me, but the uncertainty in his eyes was unmistakable. Whoever this person was, they weren't a part of Luke's world that I had ever seen before. What's going on? I asked, my voice trembling as I looked between the two of them. Luke didn't answer, but the other figure stepped forward, his eyes fixed on me now, as if he had been waiting for this moment all along. You have no idea what you've just stepped into, the figure said, his voice cold and calculating. And in that moment, I realized my life had just changed in ways I couldn't comprehend. The kiss that had stolen my heart wasn't the beginning of a love story. It was the start of something much darker, and I wasn't sure I was ready for it. The stranger's words hung in the air like a heavy cloud, and my heart thudded in my chest as I tried to make sense of what he had just said. You have no idea what you've just stepped into. The intensity in his eyes felt like a warning, and it sent a chill down my spine. I looked at Luke, hoping for some kind of explanation, but his face was unreadable, his jaw clenched tightly as if he were battling some invisible force. I could see that whatever this was, it wasn't just about the kiss. It wasn't just a fleeting moment of passion. It was something deeper, something darker. I felt as if I were standing on the edge of a precipice, teetering between two worlds that I didn't understand. One of them, I knew, was my normal life, quiet, predictable, safe. The other? That was Luke's world, and I had no idea how dangerous or unpredictable it truly was. Who are you? I asked the stranger, my voice shaky but firm. What do you want from me? The stranger's lips curled into a faint, almost sadistic smile. You're the key, he said, to everything, and you don't even know it. Luke's hand moved subtly toward mine, but he stopped just short of touching me. His eyes flickered between the stranger and me, and the tension between the two men was palpable. I had never seen Luke like this, vulnerable, unsure. He was always so confident, so certain of what he wanted. But now there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes that only made me more uneasy. Stay away from her, Luke growled, his voice low and dangerous. The stranger didn't seem to be intimidated, his expression unfazed. In fact, there was almost a glint of amusement in his eyes, like he had anticipated Luke's reaction. You can't protect her from this, Luke, the stranger said, his voice laced with dark amusement. She doesn't even know what she's capable of yet. The words stung, each one carrying a weight I couldn't understand. What was I capable of? What was this power that the stranger spoke of? I had no answers, only more questions. My mind raced as I tried to piece together the fragments of this puzzle, but it was like trying to solve a riddle with missing pieces. Luke stepped closer to me, a protective instinct in his every move. "You need to leave, now," he said, his voice firm but with an edge of desperation. But the stranger just smiled again, taking a slow step back, as though the whole situation amused him. "We'll see, Luke, we'll see." Then, without warning, he disappeared into the shadows, leaving me with 100 unanswered questions and a sinking feeling in my gut. Luke turned to me, his face conflicted, torn between wanting to protect me and knowing that something much bigger was coming, something neither of us could stop. "Come with me," Luke whispered urgently, taking my hand. "It's not safe here." But I hesitated, looking back at the spot where the stranger had vanished. The air felt heavy, and my heart raced as I realized the world I thought I knew was slipping away, and the kiss that had stolen my heart was just the beginning of something much darker. Something I wasn't sure I could face. As Luke tugged me toward the alley, my heart was pounding in my chest. Every step I took seemed to echo with the uncertainty I felt deep inside. We had to get away, that much was clear. But where could we go? The world I knew had already started to unravel, and I wasn't sure if there was any place left to hide. Luke's grip on my hand tightened, his steps quick and deliberate. His eyes kept darting over his shoulder, as though expecting the stranger to emerge from the shadows at any moment. He pulled me into a nearby building, a rundown bookstore that smelled of dust and old paper. The creaky door shut behind us, and I found myself in a dimly lit room filled with towering bookshelves. The silence was suffocating, and I felt more out of place than I had ever felt in my life. Luke paced back and forth, his brows furrowed, clearly agitated. "We don't have much time," he said, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I should have told you sooner, but I couldn't risk it." "Risk what?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What's going on, Luke? Who was that man?" His gaze flickered to me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. "He's part of a group, people who've been watching us for a long time. You're not just any woman, Grace. You're special." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine as his words sank in. "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" Luke stopped pacing and looked at me, his expression conflicted, as though deciding whether to tell me the truth. "You were chosen," he said, his voice low, almost afraid of his own admission. "You've always been more than you think you are. That's why I kissed you, Grace. That's why everything is happening now." The room seemed to close in around me. I tried to make sense of his words, but they felt like fragments of a dream, something I couldn't fully grasp. "Chosen for what? What do you mean?" Luke walked over to one of the bookshelves, pulling a dusty old book from the shelf. He opened it to a page halfway through and turned it toward me. There was a drawing, an ancient symbol, intricate and detailed. It looked strangely familiar, like something I had seen in a dream. "That symbol," he continued, his voice thick with emotion, "is a marker. It's the key to a power older than time itself, a power that you're connected to." My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to say something, to ask 100 questions, but the weight of his words left me speechless. Before I could speak, the door to the bookstore slammed open with a deafening crash, and the sound of footsteps echoed through the dim room. Luke's face hardened. "Get ready, Grace," he said urgently. "They're here." I spun around, my heart racing, just as the stranger from earlier stepped into the room, flanked by two other figures. The tension was unbearable, the air thick with the promise of something violent and unrelenting. "This is it. the stranger said, his voice cold and final. You can't hide anymore. But just as I thought the world was about to collapse around me, Luke stepped in front of me, his stance protective but also resigned, as though he knew what was coming. I won't let them take you, he said, his voice unwavering. The stranger laughed softly, shaking his head. It's not up to you anymore, Luke. She's already ours. The words hung in the air like a curse, and I realized with horror that the battle for my heart was only just beginning. What had started with a kiss had escalated into something much darker, and I wasn't sure I was ready for the storm that was about to hit. The tension in the room was palpable, and I could feel the weight of the stranger's words pressing down on me like a heavy fog. Luke stood in front of me, his body rigid, every muscle taut as if preparing for a fight he couldn't avoid. The stranger's two companions flanked him, their cold eyes scanning the room with an almost predatory intensity. My pulse raced as I tried to make sense of everything that had led to this moment, but the truth seemed too complicated to grasp. You're not taking her, Luke growled, his voice steady but filled with an undeniable urgency. His eyes never left the stranger, even as his hand subtly reached for something hidden in his jacket. The stranger smirked. You think you can stop this, Luke? You've already lost. As if on cue, the two figures behind the stranger advanced, their movements synchronized. One reached toward me, and instinctively I stepped back. My heart pounded in my chest, and the fear I had been trying to suppress gripped me with a force I couldn't shake. But then something unexpected happened. Luke's hand shot out, pulling a small object from his jacket. It was a pendant, glowing faintly with a soft, golden light. The moment it touched the air, a powerful surge of energy coursed through the room, causing the shadows to flicker and the air to hum with an unnatural vibration. The stranger's expression shifted, his cocky smirk faltering for the briefest moment. No, he whispered, as though realizing something crucial too late. Luke didn't hesitate. He moved faster than I could react, throwing the pendant toward the stranger. It struck the floor and the entire room seemed to tremble. A brilliant flash of light erupted, and for a split second, everything went still. The figures standing by the stranger froze, their eyes wide in disbelief. The glow from the pendant pulsed brighter and brighter, and then, with a deafening crack, it exploded, sending a shockwave of energy that knocked everyone off their feet. When the light faded, I could barely make sense of what had happened. The stranger and his companions were gone, vanished into thin air, as if they had never been there at all. Luke staggered slightly, catching his breath, the weight of whatever had just transpired crashing down on him. I blinked, trying to process everything, my mind spinning. What just happened? I asked, my voice trembling. Luke turned to me, his face pale but determined. We stopped them. For now. But before I could say anything, he looked over my shoulder, his eyes narrowing as if sensing something in the distance. But this isn't over. They'll be back. Just as I opened my mouth to ask more, something I hadn't expected happened. The pendant, still glowing softly in Luke's hand, suddenly pulsed once more, sending a wave of energy over the room. My breath caught as I realized the unexpected twist. Luke wasn't just protecting me, he was part of this world, this ancient, dangerous world I was now a part of too. And somehow, the kiss that had stolen my heart had bound us together in ways I couldn't yet understand. The final realization hit me like a wave. This wasn't just about love. It was about something far bigger. And what had started with a kiss was only the beginning. The room was still, the air thick with a quiet that felt almost unnatural. Luke stood there, holding the pendant, his eyes focused on it, as if it was the only thing tethering him to reality. I was still trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. The energy, the symbols, The strange power I now knew was connected to me in ways I couldn't fully grasp. The stranger's cryptic words echoed in my mind. You're already ours. But they didn't matter anymore. What does this mean for us? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, still processing the truth. Luke turned to me, a soft smile on his lips, though it was tinged with exhaustion. It means we have a long road ahead, Grace. They'll come after you again. But now you're not alone. He stepped closer, the weight of the situation sinking in. There was still so much we didn't know, but one thing was clear. We were bound by something much stronger than just a kiss. This wasn't just about love. It was about destiny, a connection that was bigger than us both. I nodded, finally understanding. The love between us wasn't just a fleeting moment. It was timeless, built on something deeper than I had ever imagined. And though the challenges ahead were uncertain, I knew that we would face them together. No longer was I just a bystander in my own life. I was a part of something extraordinary. Luke reached out, taking my hand in his once more. We'll figure it out, he said softly, together. As we stood there, the energy from the pendant began to fade, but the bond between us only grew stronger. We may not have all the answers, but in that moment, we had each other, and that was enough to face whatever came next. The story of the kiss that stole my heart wasn't just about love, it was about finding the strength to confront the unknown and trusting that love in all its forms would guide us through the darkness.